Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Mark One Tower, this is Albatross 1-3, requesting permission to land, over.
I don't need a computer to tell me how to land a damn airplane.
6.
Heads-up display, check.
5,
Lasers, check.
4,
Particle beam, check.
3,
Photon bolts, check.
2,
Chair control, check.
1.
Let's do it.
Broadcasting from a secret underground location somewhere in Mos Eisley. This is the Docking Bay 77 podcast. Make yourself comfortable. The show is about to start.
Good evening. I bid you welcome to the first in our series of Universal Horror Classics here on Docking Bay 77. All this month, we'll be covering some of the wonderful 1930s Universal horror films. And we're starting off tonight with a big bite into the original Dracula.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. Thousands. Millions of them.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
Dracula? Oh, what's he done to you, Dave? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened and extended his arms, and he made me drink.
Joining me tonight are two other creatures of the night. I have with me Liam Lewis.
Blah.
That was scary. And also John Wright.
Welcome.
Nicely done. All righty. So let's hit us all with some opening thoughts. Anybody's first time, anybody's millionth time? What do you all think about this movie?
I will say that this movie is a bit, I love this movie to death, but compared to what we're used to in today's cinema, it can be a bit of a difficult watch. And I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go on, but there's no denying that this was, for all intents and purposes, the first real horror film. It established the genre. It established a lot of the myths and appearances that we tend to look for in the classic vampire. I mean, I don't know of anyone that if you mention Dracula to will not mentally imagine Bela Lugosi in some way, shape, or form. So the impact that this film has, especially now that it's quickly approaching its 100th year anniversary, is undeniable.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'll talk more about the sort of almost silent film aspects of it later on. That was something I noticed as well. I saw this movie first as a teen and was entertained by it. I was really into old movies even then and enjoyed it. But then and now, it has never been my favorite of the Universal horror movies.
Right.
But it's so foundational that you need to see it. And I'll talk more about this later too, but I watched it this time around with the Philip Glass score, and it was really kind of a revelation and made it much more entertaining. But so like I said, I've known the film a long time, and got to it early enough, but I had not yet seen Christopher Lee and a lot of the Lost Boys and a lot of the takes on it. It was one of my earliest true Dracula experiences outside of Count Chocula commercials and stuff like that, which don't really count, I don't think, although they are part of the legacy.
Yeah.
How about you, Liam? What was your introduction, or what are your kind of opening thoughts about the one and only Dracula?
I have loved this movie for longer than I care to mention. This probably goes all the way back to, I want to say, like middle school. Like it was like fifth grade. Because Netflix has just switched over from being only a disc service in the mail to like the streaming service that we know today. And they had like September had just hit, and they had just dropped all of the Universal original movies, and they were there until Halloween. And so I had, of course, heard of all of these films, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, all these people loom very large. When you list certain monsters, people often think of some variation of the Universal imagery because it's just so iconic and prevalent. But this was my first time really seeing them, and I watched Dracula first, and it was really fun because I watched it like in my room on my iPod with like all the lights in my room off, so I watched it like in the dark, and it was really spooky. But yeah, I fell in love with this movie. It's hard to say what my favorite Universal film is, but this is definitely in my top 3. I adore this movie. I have loved the book for about the same length of time, because I kind of discovered them both simultaneously. So plot-wise, there are many things that I prefer in the book, although I accept they would be difficult to translate to screen. But I think as far as character study, this film is one of the best, if not the best, as far as capturing the characters of the book, if not the plot.
Fantastic. You gave me a perfect segue. Although first I have to pause and say that your Netflix while I was in middle school comment is making me age like Dracula exposed to sunlight.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like crumbling into dust right here
Yeah.
as
You're
I
like
reflect on that.
You're like the
But
original
anyway.
Nosferatu, like you're fading into the negative.
Yes. See, I don't know.
As I talk.
I don't know where you guys grew up, but I grew up in Monroe, Ohio, which is halfway through Dayton and halfway between Dayton and Cincinnati, in the age of 3 channels and UHF on the television. But I was fortunate enough where I was at, I could pick up Dr. Creep out of Dayton and the Cool Ghoul out of Cincinnati. And that's where I fell in love with Universal Monsters.
You have the best of both worlds. That is fantastic. So
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
you were talking about the book, Liam. That's a perfect segue. We will move into That's the Fact, Jack. So tell us a little bit about the source material, about the Bram Stoker novel, and any other inspirations for this movie. I'm sure you've got a lot to tell us, so hit it, Liam.
Oh boy, do I. As I said, I have a great fondness for this book. If for no other reason than it was published by an Irishman. I am very proud of my Irish heritage, so I'm very happy that one of the greatest vampire tales ever told was written by Irish author Bram Stoker, and it was published in 1897. Stoker wrote 11 other books besides Dracula, but none ever achieved the same level of popularity, and he was mostly known during his lifetime, interestingly enough, as a theater manager. The character of Dracula was largely inspired by Henry Irving, who was not only a very gaunt, thin, imposing figure, but was also notorious for being the boss from hell. He was not a pleasant fellow to interact with, so a lot of Dracula's domineering personality is taken from Mr. Irving. Abraham Stoker was born in 1847 in a suburb of Dublin, and his mother entertained, we'll say, her children with terrifying Irish folktales, as well as stories of the cholera and scarlet fever epidemics that she survived. And Stoker later incorporated those tales into his works. The story of Dracula is told through letters, diary entries, and newspaper articles, giving you multiple characters but no singular protagonist. You could argue it's Jonathan or Mina, but I feel like this is like the original found footage. You feel like a detective piecing together an old case, which makes it a really fun read. It is regarded as a seminal work of Gothic fiction and is one of the most famous works of English literature. Dracula holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most portrayed literary character. Stoker adopted some characteristics of existing vampire legend to his story, such as their aversion to garlic and staking them through the heart to kill them. He, however, invented other attributes like having to be invited into another person's home, having to return to the earth of their homeland to sleep every day, and having no reflection in mirrors. There were many good reviews for this book, but the best one, I think, is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's letter to Mr. Stoker, in which he said, "The old professor is most excellent, and so are the two girls. I congratulate you with all my heart on having written so fine a book." One reviewer found it so genuinely frightening that they suggested that there should be a warning on it saying it is for strong men only and should not be left around maiden aunts and parlor maids with hysterical tendencies, which is very anachronistic of that time period. Sadly, the novel failed to earn Stoker much money. For the first 1,000 sales, Stoker earned no royalties. Since its publication, Dracula has never been out of print. It is an interesting description of the time and place of Victorian London, and modern readers discuss themes such as sexuality and gender, race, religion, superstition, science, politics, economics, and disease.
And that covers a lot. Years ago, and I can't recall the author or the title. I will try and find it so maybe Dayton can drop it in the notes. But someone wrote, it was in the late 70s, I don't remember that. Someone wrote, not a sequel exactly, but they wrote another version of Dracula using different diary entries and different letters and different newspaper things. So they did that kind of epistolary thing, but it told the story completely differently. And all of a sudden, like, it turned almost everything you know about the book on its head.
I know what you're referring to, but I can't think of the title as well. It's not the Swedish version, is it?
I don't recall now.
Okay.
I just remember that I read it and I was like, what? You mean, it changed everything. And it was such a clever way to approach that, which wouldn't have really worked if the book had been told just in a regular, omniscient narrator kind of way, like most books are.
We'll have to check that out. I'm sure a cursory Google read will dig it up. Another fun thing is there is a podcast, and I believe it is also an email subscription service that you can subscribe to called Dracula. And the way that works, Robert, as a Twin Peaks fan, I'm sure you'll know of the tradition of starting to watch Twin Peaks on the day that Dale Cooper arrives in the town. Dracula does a similar thing where it gives you the diary entry that corresponds to the day, where it starts on the 3rd of May, and then each day as you go through on the day the entry has in, you'll get that chapter.
Oh, I like that. That's fantastic. That might be something fun to do next year, because I think we've already passed the starting point. Well, nice. So you covered the book brilliantly. It is funny because, as we'll learn with some of our cast in these films too, and the directors, Stoker was kind of a one-hit wonder. To your point, he wrote many novels, and he wrote plays, and he acted, and he did lots of stuff. But basically, if he hadn't done Dracula, he would be like a footnote to a footnote at this point. So it's interesting to me when these people that are literally known worldwide, Dracula is at least, and then you have the poor author who has a whole other shelf of books that would not even be able to be probably in print if it were not for Dracula. So,
well, yeah, and like, I will admit that Dracula is probably his strongest work, but I have dipped my toe into the rest of his bibliography. And for example, The Lair of the White Worm was the last thing he wrote, and it does have some incoherency to it. It's not very strong, but I think it's a fascinating read.
Have you seen the Ken Russell movie?
Oh, I've seen the Ken Russell movie.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I could talk about Ken Russell for days, and I will
Yeah.
not. But it's not one of his best film, but it is certainly one of his most entertaining films.
Yes, the film and the book are both an example of not the strongest work by the creator, but definitely one of the most interesting to experience.
I think bonkers was the review word that got used most about Russell's film. It's bonkers. But Peter Capaldi was in it, and Hugh Grant was in it, and I mean, it's worth reviewing. Anyway, speaking of films, John, why don't you lead us into some film facts and some information about the production of the movie, things like that?
Well, sure. Just some interesting things about this film. As we've already stated, this film was filmed in 1931 on a budget of $355,050. Was filmed in approximately 42 working days. And to save cost, it was filmed consecutively in order. Every scene as it appears in the movie is how it was shot. So first scene, first day, blah, blah, blah. So, it is based primarily on the play, not so much on the book, as Liam had previously mentioned. Because in part, they had just come out of the Great Depression, and it was much cheaper to film the play version than to try to recreate the epic scale that Stoker had written in the book. As we know, Bela Lugosi, this was his most prominent role. He was not the first choice for Dracula, though. The first choice for Dracula is actually rumored to be Lon Chaney, who had passed away just prior to the casting of this. Lugosi lobbied strongly for this role, in so much that he wrote the producers, he wrote the director. He actually received a note from the head of the studio that said, Lugosi, no.
Just no.
But eventually they caved, and part of the reason they caved is Bela was only paid $500 a week to portray Dracula for the 7 weeks of filming. So he earned a total of $35,000, whereas 3,500. Right? Excuse me, math. I'm an art guy. Math was never my strong suit. Bela was paid $500 a week. The actor that played Jonathan Harker, Van Helsing, was paid close to $2,000 a week. This was very much a labor of love for Bela. At the same time they were filming this, they actually filmed two other versions. They filmed a Spanish version, which would use the same sets and take over at the end of filming. They also had the advantage of watching the dailies to kind of see what worked for the English language version and what they could improve on. And they filmed a silent version as well, because this was one of the first talkies, and not all theaters had moved over to the ability to show talkie films. Browning is listed as the director, although there are some arguments to say that he was not, that it was actually his primary photographer that did the majority of the directing, because Browning was very upset. He was very close to Chaney, and when Chaney died, he became very depressed and allegedly slipped into the bottle a little too much. Let's see, it's generally regarded as the film that kickstarted the horror genre in Hollywood. After playing Renfield, Dwight Fry would find himself typecast. He found himself restricted to playing eccentric or jittery types that had a manic edge to them, or criminal lunatic types. Some other things to note about the film is some versions of the film were actually tinted green to give it a more eerie appearance in the theater. We never see fangs in this film, and there's only ever one drop of blood portrayed, and is not in a victim. There we go.
Well, the fangs, I know, I've got some trivia here. The fangs came out with Christopher Lee in 1958. Yes. Mm-hmm. He was the originator of the fangs. It was funny because rewatching this a few years back, not for this episode, but just I was like, wait, where are the fangs? Like all because right. you know the Dracula lore. I was in my mind quite sure that the lining of Dracula's cape is red. It is a black and white movie, but somehow I still see the inside of his cape is red because that's what Dracula's cape is. As for the blood, are you talking about when Renfield cuts himself on the paperclip or the staple? Yeah, yes. that was one of the fun bits they took from the play.
Yes.
that was not in the original book, which
Right.
I thought was kind of fun. But yeah, and speaking of Bela Lugosi, kind of like the same curse as The Curse of Dracula. The Curse of
Yes.
Dracula, the book and movie, where he kind of was a one-note wonder for the rest of his career too. He
Right.
wanted so much to do this movie. He'd done the play for a couple of years, and he was, he thought, I'll go to Hollywood. This will make me as an actor. They'll see how great I am. And then he basically played Dracula or variations of Dracula for the remainder of his career.
Right.
And again, same thing along with Stoker. No one would know Lugosi's name if it were not for this film. So kind of sad, kind of interesting. But yeah, I love I'm just going to bring it up now because it fits in. I love that you talked about the silent part because yeah, this movie is so like 1931. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm a big lover of 1930s movies, and pretty much 1932 and before, you're pretty much in for a silent movie where they talk a little bit here and there, and they're just not as cinematic in the ways we think of as cinematic now. There wasn't even a lot of camera movement because that made noise and it picked up the sound, and so the camera just kind of sits there and then all of a sudden, about 33 or so, we started getting more lively, and then all of a sudden, the late 30s movies are as fantastic as the ones we have now. They just don't have CG and color, but I don't mind either of those things. But I watching this the other night. I love it. It plays a lot like a silent movie. The whole beautiful opening where Renfield is taking the carriage up to Borgo Pass, and you see all the little Hungarians praying and being worried and stuff. The camera just stays on their faces, and they're giving these expressions exactly like you would have seen in something from 1918 or 1925. And so there is very much a silent sensibility to that. And I think that it's partly because that's what Browning was most known for. Todd Browning, the majority of his films were done during the silent era. And I think he did, I want to say 10 films with Lon Chaney.
Yes.
And he thought this is going to be our big moment where we're both going to do a sound movie and break through and be, and Browning worked for a few more years and then he'd already had an accident due to alcoholism earlier in his career that really messed him up both mentally and physically, and then was an alcoholic during the shooting of this movie, and but he managed to pull out the movie Freaks a couple years later.
Oh yeah,
which is another a horror classic, or kind of a creep out classic, I guess. But anyway, yeah, very sad, strange life he had. But I mean, I'm glad you mentioned about the silent, because it plays so beautifully as a silent movie. You almost don't need the dialogue, or I could see you
Right.
putting in inner titles and just getting by with that, because the compositions and the lingering on the faces and expressions and the gorgeous giant sets and things are just all kind of fantastic. So I'm talking about something I like. Let's segue into That Was Totally Wicked.
That was totally wicked!
Let's hear about some stuff that you guys like as well. This time, Liam, I will start with you. What are some of the things you really like about this movie?
I just absolutely adore the performances. A lot of people nowadays can kind of feel that movies, when you get to like this far back in cinematic history, people can feel that performances can be a little over the top, a little stilted, a little silly. But honestly, I think that when you really dig down, these performances are just as good as any other version of Dracula. A lot of people would, I feel like, not get into Renfield so much because he's a little ridiculous. But honestly, I'll talk about this more when we do The Mummy. But Dwight Frye's performance as Renfield is phenomenal. It is very large performance, but I feel like it's very anachronistic of the type of madness that is portrayed in the book, this flip-flopping from like the mania that Dracula's control has induced in him to the lucidity of like begging these people to listen and get out while the getting's good. I just think it's phenomenal. Mina in particular is a fantastic lead. Like, her terror is very real. Her raw emotion really comes through. And my favorite part of watching this movie is watching Edward Van Sloan and Bela Lugosi play off of each other as Van Helsing and Dracula. there's a misconception that Dracula is based on Vlad the Impaler. Stoker did not have that particular Vlad anywhere in his notes. The order of the Dracula is very large, so there are many, many Vlads and many, many Vlad Draculas in the folklore. Stoker mostly picked it because it translates to devil. But Lugosi definitely captures that, like, Hungarian warlord nobleman, like, I take what I want and I fear no one. I am a force of nature and death upon the land. And Edward Van Sloan does a great job as his opposite number of, like, the warrior of, like, light against the darkness. And that moment where they're introduced to each other and with no dialogue, they just kind of, like, semi-bow to each other and they just kind of square off. You can tell they like smell it on each other. A fellow hunter has entered the room. So the performances in this film are just phenomenal for me.
Yeah, I think you hit on a great point there. And of course, Van Sloan had also worked in, or Edward Sloan had also worked in the stage play with Lugosi. So they played those characters together. So they probably had a nice chemistry. But to your point about the silent acting, early like silent acting and early 30s acting, to our taste, is very mannered and very stiff and very, very kind of just weird and artificial. But I find for myself that in these kind of movies, in the horror movies, in some of the early musicals where it's not a slice of life, it's not, down on the farm or, a city girl makes good. It's a weird story anyway. So I feel like what in a realistic film we would take is really kind of campy or weird or over the top acting. In Dracula is perfect. I mean, my God, they're like wandering around in this ridiculous abbey, and the acting fits for this. I think if you put some of those same people in, just a regular romance or something, it would come off as kind of creepy.
It's definitely the vibe of Dracula, like like Renfield, like this insane lunatic who eats animals, breaks into their house for the 5th time, and they're just like, now, Renfield, back to your cell. Because that's the Victorian mannerisms that you get in the book.
I got to shout out Dwight Frye, by the way, because besides appearing, of course, in Dracula and Invisible Man and kind of cornering and several other, he appeared in so many Universal horrors, often uncredited. They just kind of kept him around the lot and popped him in as a villager here or there. But he also was in the original version of Casablanca, also from 1931, that got remade into the Casablanca that we know and love.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm saying Casablanca. I mean Maltese Falcon, the other Bogey movie. He was in the original Maltese Falcon.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I forget the name of the character, but he's like the flunky to the Fat Man. It's like the Peter Lorre role in the later film.
I got you.
But he plays it, reasonably realistic, and he was a very good actor. I mean, I always forget watching Dracula that like he's not crazy and giggling and eating bugs the whole movie. Like at the beginning, he's like, "Oh, hello, I'm here to sign a contract, and I'd like to have my luggage brought
in." He's a very believable lawyer, and then you get to the end, and he's begging for his life before he gets thrown down those stairs, and you're like, "Oh my God, this poor man."
One of the movie was so horrific, apparently, on its release, that one of the things they did right off after the release, and we have a special surprise for you listeners at the end of the episode, so for another thing that was cut, but apparently he let a series of blood-curdling screams as he was thrown down those stairs that audiences found so horrific that they like dialed them way down, so they're barely hurt. And I guess some of the DVDs and Blu-rays out there have the original version with like the horrific, prolonged, loud screaming, and some have the more kind of muffled, subdued screaming, depending on what print they used. But I love that. What else hits you with this movie, Liam? Anything in particular?
It's interesting. John, you brought up the Spanish version, which I do adore, and I'm glad that you brought that up. It is really fascinating to watch because, people talk about like Citizen Kane being like the best movie ever, and it pioneered all of these camera techniques, and like they're not wrong, but if you watch the Spanish version of Dracula, I argue that you will find cinematography on par with Citizen Kane and the other like greatest movies in history. Like it's really something to watch. There are a lot of people who prefer it to this one,
Yes.
I
and
kind of do.
they
I'm in that
kind of
camp.
yeah, and like I am almost there myself. Like the only thing that holds me back is Lugosi. Like I wish that Lugosi was in the Spanish version. But I do want to come to bat for the
come to bat. Okay.
I want to come to bat for
the stakes are high with that one.
No.
Yes. But no, I do want to defend the Todd Browning version a little. The cinematography is very good, but it more comes down to the staging and the editing. The editing is very clever in this movie. Just the long shots, the way we cut to the sun setting when the villager is trying to warn um Renfield. I love one of my favorite shots is when Renfield collapses to the ground and then the brides are closing in on him and then Dracula sweeps in through the window and like commands them to be gone. That whole sequence is the staging and the editing is very, very strong in this movie, particularly also when Mina is under Dracula's thrall and she tries to attack Jonathan, the way she just moves out of camera and you know exactly what's happening, but you're not seeing it. The cinematography is stronger in the Spanish version, but I really love the staging and the editing in this movie.
I dig so much the shot where the three brides of Dracula or whatever they are all kind of just slowly moving toward the window. It's like it seems like super slow motion. It's like they're on wheels or something. Like you don't get any sense of like walking, and we just sort of like, and it's such a great, creepy, almost surreal image. I could play it on a loop just watching.
And then you'll get little humorous moments like all of the creatures of the night like stirring about as they exit their coffin. But no, the best part is the Dracula comes out of his coffin, the brides come out of their coffin, and then we cut to a little honeybee that comes out of its own little honeybee coffin because it's like a honeybee vampire or something. I don't even know, but I love that shot. It's so ridiculous. I didn't notice it until Mom pointed it out when we were watching it. And she was like, "Oh my god, I remembered the bee, but I didn't remember it coming out of its own little bee coffin."
That is hilarious. Well, I'm sure there's a reason for it. John, I keep jumping in because I'm so excited about how much like the movie. Tell us some of the things that you thought were totally wicked about this movie.
I really love the majority of the shots of Lugosi and the way he is lit with those two little pin spotlights that they shine directly into his eyes to make you think that he is hypnotizing whoever it is that will be his next victim. It is just so well done. It is just so iconic. It set the standard for what most vampires are thought to look like when that power is emitted from them. And to piggyback a little bit on what Liam said, the back and forth between Van Helsing and Dracula, it's not a physical altercation between it's a meeting of the minds between the two of them. It's a battle of wills between the two of them because Van Helsing from the get-go clearly knows what Dracula is. He's just not ready to tell everyone else. I think it's like, I know what this guy is, but I need to be sure. And the minute he is sure, then the gloves are off, so to speak. But again, it's not physical. It's a meeting of the minds. It's like, you know who I am and I know who you are. I think in the initial meeting, when Dracula is introduced, he's got this air of regalcy and superiority because he's in his tux and he's all dapper and debonair so he's intimidating, but Van Helsing's not intimidated by him because when Van Helsing is intimidated or introduced to Dracula, Dracula knows who he is. He's like, even in the old country, we know who you are and what you've done. And the casual person would think, oh, that's because he's a famous scientist or a famous doctor. But no, it's because he's a famous occultist that has been battling vampires from the get-go. He made it his life's work to learn the things that you're not supposed to learn to protect everyone else. And there's just those little subplots in there like that aren't really brought to the surface, but when you sit and think about them, it's like it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, what I love about Van Helsing is he is a professor. He's a scientist.
Yes.
So even though he knows who and what Dracula is, empirically he had to prove it first.
Right.
So it's like he's not going to just like walk up to a stranger and drive a stake through his heart. So it's like I got to do the mirror thing. I gotta make sure I have my evidence. He's very scientific and very factual, which I think in a story that is so over the top and so freewheeling,
yeah,
that you have this character who is just pure logic, even though he knows like I have to kill this thing and this is an aberration, but he doesn't just like slaughter him. It's all very kind of clinical and scientific and like he does it very nicely. It's a nice arc for him.
Yeah, that's another reason why I feel like as far as like who the characters are, there's less characters than there are in the novel, but as far as capturing the characters, this is one of your best bets because a lot of people nowadays think of Van Helsing as like Hugh Jackman's character in the movie Van Helsing, or they think of someone similar to the Belmonts from Castlevania. But like what's interesting about the book is that it's all the young men who do the actual slaying. Van Helsing is the mind behind their brute force. It's all about the wits with him.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anything else that you really just thought was just so great about this movie, John?
The sets. The sets are incredible. I mean, and again, this was a time where just coming out of the Great Depression, these sets are elaborate. I mean, and yes, the special effects pale by today's comparisons. You see the bat on the fishing line when it's driving the carriage.
My favorite is the wind up Spencer spider that crawls up the wall.
Yes. But the sets themselves were so iconic. They set the tone for what is essentially one of the first cinematic universes. They were used multiple times. I mean, the opera house where Dracula meets Mina and for the first time, that was from the set of, if I'm not mistaken, Phantom of the Opera.
Mm-hmm,
The original set from that. Some of the sets of Dracula's castles were used again and again and again in other features. And yes, it was a cost-cutting measure, but it was also because they're so doggone iconic and they just fit the feel, those gothic feels of those movies so well.
I 100% agree. I noticed that a lot on this rewatch. Of course, Dracula's castle in Transylvania, Bela Lugosi at the top of those stairs, is made partially so iconic by that like massive staircase with all those cobwebs. But then I also thought about things like that quick sequence of the Vesta coming to England bearing Dracula and his brides in their coffins. Even if the faraway shot of the ship is a miniature in like a tub of water, even if that stage of the ship deck was reused from Captain Blood and not built just for this movie, like the amount of money and passion that went into that sequence, like you've got the deck rocking, the waves are crashing, like the effects are old, but they're by no means cheap at all in that particular regard.
I'll clue you in here. A lot of that footage was reused from a silent movie. I don't recall the title, but I read that when I was reading about it. They reused it cleverly, and in fact, because of when they used the hand crank, the timing was a little bit different. So if you look, the timing is weird on how the people are moving because it wasn't the same. 32 frames a second or whatever they were doing in 1931. But I love that too. You guys are stealing all my things I like about this movie. I was going to mention this about the sets as well. Although I got to say, I mean, as much as the Abbey is fantastic with, again, another massive stairway, and I kept going, matte painting? Were we doing matte paintings yet? It's not
Yes, they
CG.
were.
Like, what's the deal? Well, yes, the Borgo Pass and all that in the beginning, but it was just, I mean, the set where with the big curved stairway in the Abbey. I mean, that was obviously a set because they walk up those stairs all that height,
Right.
But I loved seeing the little European village at the very beginning of the movie, because that village got used in so many Universal things. And in fact, years ago when I went to Universal Studios in Hollywood, it was, I don't know if it's still there now, sadly, but it was still standing, and it was like the greatest thing because like
it's still there. It's on the tour.
It is.
When
fantastic.
Mom and I just this past Thanksgiving visited
Yeah.
my Uncle Sam and Aunt Paula and my grandmother in California, and one of the days we had a Universal day where we went to
I
Universal
knew you'd
Studios.
gone, so
Yep.
it's still there.
We took the tram tour, and it's one of the first things you see is like you do like the studio warehouses, and then you do like the New York where they film Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then you do the like old European like Baravian village that they use for Dracula and Frankenstein. That's the inspiration for
Yeah, it's so fun to see that.
Dark Universe now.
That's awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Well, to keep this moving along, because we are all very chatty about this movie we love, I'm not going to add any more Totally Wicked because I've been piling it on yours.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
So if we can even come up with anything at all, let's jump into some no, sir, I didn't like it. What are some things that you did not care for about this movie this time around? John, I will start with you.
Okay. I need to preface this by making it seem like this is going to seem like I hate this movie. And I don't, but I have some issues. My first and my strongest issue, and Liam, no offense, I know you really appreciated the character of Mina. I feel that they do Mina such a disservice in this movie based on the source material from the book. Mina is a strong, intelligent woman. Many would argue, myself included, that she's actually more of a hero in the book than some of the male characters. And
oh yeah, I 100% agree.
I feel like she's lessened to a degree where she just becomes the damsel in distress that Jonathan has to save. And I feel that it does a disservice to her, and it does a disservice to their that being said, some other things that I don't really care for, we just touched on it. I hate that they changed the name of the boat. The boat's the Demeter. It should be the Demeter.
Yeah, I love the name the Demeter. It's so good.
I don't understand why it was changed. That is what it is.
Yeah, I need to Google what a Vesta is and why that made a good ship name.
And I don't, as much as I love Renfield, because Renfield does become pretty much for all intents and purposes, the narrator of this show, this play. I feel that giving him the role that was initially Harker's, the role of going to be the liaison for Dracula to move to England, again, diminishes Harker's role in the movie to where he's almost, and I guess maybe it was intended to be this way, he's almost just a side character instead of being one of the main protagonists. And I understand that it doesn't translate well from book to movie, and I understand this is more based on the play. That's just the things that, stuff like that is what causes me to lose some of the joy that I have for this movie.
I feel you. I have a strong reaction almost always when I see a movie that's based on a book I really like, because I'm like, that is not my book.
It's a struggle.
Seldom if ever.
Sometimes I can let it go and look at the movie for what it is, but sometimes I'm just like, never again. I'm out. That was not my book, and these things happen. I get you. Anything else? Anything else that falls into your I do not like this very much part?
Oh no, I'll defer the floor.
All righty, Liam. I
Yeah,
think
that
this will be brief from you as well, perhaps. Let's see.
kind of, because John did kind of touch on mine, but I'll just go ahead and expand. I do agree with you, John, as much as I enjoy the performance of Helen Chandler in this movie. I will say I do enjoy Mina in this film, but she is very much not the character in the book, and that's kind of my thing. I understand that we're based more on the play, and I understand that like there's a lot of plot and a lot of characters in the book, and we gotta trim this down a little. I understand, but I do feel like there's a lot missing. It's funny that the Mina from the book ends up being the character from Dracula that joins uh Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen rather than
Yes.
Harker or anybody else. Because she really is that strong. You know, she's like learning shorthand. She's like a school teacher. She's like a working girl. She's not taking anybody's crap. She's very much a strong character. And I really adore her. Helen Chandler is much more the we're setting up the archetype for what will be better seen in later slasher movies of you have Lucy, who's like the promiscuous girl, and so she has to die, but then the chaste damsel girl, she gets to live. She'll be saved by her boyfriend. Yeah, and Jonathan's kind of wooden too. He goes through a lot of trials in the book that are not present here. But my biggest issue is that poor Lucy's death gets kind of glazed over. Renfield and Jonathan need to happen to get Dracula to England, but Lucy's death is kind of the inciting incident of the plot because she is like everybody adores her. She's got like these three guys are bros, and they're best friends. They all love Lucy. They each take turns proposing to her and accept whatever choice she makes and still decide to be friends and love her no matter what her decision is. And then when she dies, this person who was so beloved by everyone, like these three men, Holmwood, Morris, and Seward, make a pact with each other to like slay the demon that took her from this world. And I feel like there's so many character studies and like fascinating motivations that we just kind of get cut out of here. And so it's kind of a bummer.
Well, it is. I mean, just to push back on that, it is a longish book, and
Very long.
And to your point earlier, the fact that it's written from the point of view of so many characters gives them a depth that it would not have had if it had just been omniscient narrator, third person. So I think that I've noticed that in other things. Dangerous Liaisons was also written like as the book was written in the form of letters back and forth, and you just lose so much in a film. Although I think the film is spectacular, because you don't have these deeper insights into the really nuances of the character. All of a sudden, this character who you really learned to understand their mind and their views on things, all of a sudden becomes, Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Liaisons, and she's like pretty, and that's her. Whereas in the book,
I'm the pretty one.
She has like a whole character arc and a development and things, and it's how it translates. I get that. I'm glad there wasn't a ton of things we did not like.
Yeah, I am by no means bagging on this movie. It's just
not
like
at all.
These are characters that you get so intimate with being a part of this fan base and reading the book and watching all the different versions. And it's like being a fan of the Les Mis Broadway musical. Like, I want this guy to sing On Your Ross, and I want this guy to sing, this girl to sing Eponine. Like, you want to like cut together your own Frankenstein version to make the best possible.
That would be something to see, the Dracula Mega Mix.
Right? Wouldn't that be fun? Like,
interesting thing that I forgot to mention earlier. Did you two know who was supposedly up for the role of Mina and was passed over because she was deemed not pretty enough?
Who?
Betty Davis.
No.
Yes.
Oh my God! Can you imagine?
Even young Betty was not that pretty. I've seen her in some films, and she is not.
Oh, but can you imagine the performance we would have gotten though? It would have been so good.
Mina would have been scarier than Dracula, though. That's
right. Yeah.
Anyway, she would have bitten him. Anyway,
Yeah.
all right. So,
She ain't
well, I'm
gonna get
laughing
scared off
now.
by no cross. Jonathan's gonna die.
Yep.
Why are you smiling like that?
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
Make work your favorite. That's your favorite, okay?
Okay.
Work is your new favorite.
Fine.
Well, let's segue after all this laughter into smiling is my favorite. So we're going to run through our favorite character, scene, and remake or alternate version. I will start with character, and I will start this time with Liam. Liam, favorite character in the movie?
I gotta give it up to the main man, the titular vampire. I gotta give it up to Dracula. I am so obsessed with Bela Lugosi. I've watched almost everything he's ever done. He was such a powerful performer, and like I said, there are speeches from the book that are not in this, where Dracula talks to Jonathan about, the old days when his people, the Order of the Dragon, slayed the Turks, and, blood is such too precious a thing to spill in this day of dishonorable peace. But that pomposity, that, power, you still, through Lugosi's performance, get the impression, this guy has lived for at least 500 years. He has lived through some of the bloodiest periods of world history. He is a warrior. He is a force to be reckoned with. And as with all of his other performances, Lugosi's hypnotic gaze, his facial expressions, his body language is so powerful. It's no wonder they had a model for Chernobog when they did Night on Bald Mountain for Fantasia.
We had such great hands. I love how he used his hands.
That moment when he tries to entrance Van Helsing and he just sticks that arm out and that claw is grabbing at Van Helsing's soul. I love Dracula. I gotta go with the main man, the Big D.
The Big D. Oh, wow. Okay, fair enough. John, who is your favorite character in this film?
I mean, not to piggyback too much on Liam, but I have to go with Dracula as well, because this portrayal and this character ignited my love and my passion for the vampire genre and horror in general. And I mean, like I said in my opening, I don't know of many people that I know that when you mention vampire, and in particular Dracula, don't automatically think of Bela Lugosi. He is the stereotypical, he is the blueprint, the icon that personified this character. A close second, though, would also be Van Helsing, because like I said earlier, the battle of wits between the two, the battle of intellect between the two is just astounding. And Van Helsing is never intimidated by the Count. He stands his ground. He stands toe to toe, and he knows in the end that I think he knows in the end he's going to win. He's not afraid of what's coming, and so those would be mine.
Well, and with Van
Nice.
Sloan, you also get that chilling moment right at the end, where he sends the two lovers to go walk up the
Right.
stairs into the dawn, because it's I've got some business to attend to. You keep going, and the business he has to attend to is he's gonna stake those brides.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
not done slaying vampires yet.
And they actually pick that up in the quote unquote sequel of Dracula's Daughter. It begins right in that scene with Dracula's daughter confronting Van Helsing.
Yeah, it's a very
I was gonna say-
Rogue One into New Hope type of ending.
Yeah, he is the only actor who played the same role across this series.
Right.
A lot of our Universal Studios Monsters guys, both with Dwight Fry and David Manners and Edward N. Sloan, they all appear in a lot of these movies in different roles, but he actually came back as Van Helsing in Dracula's Daughter. So shout out to Edward N. Sloan for actually getting to be the same person twice, which not everybody got to do that.
Bela Lugosi made more for not appearing in Dracula's Daughter than he made appearing in Dracula. They paid him money to stay away from the production.
That is hilarious. Well, I'm going to flip the switch and also reject Bela Lugosi a little bit and not pick Dracula as my favorite character in this one. Part of it, I have to agree. I mean, he is incredibly compelling with the stare and the stance and the body language, but I think his actual acting, other than just his manner and his gestures, which are part of acting, I get it, but his line readings and a lot of his stuff, does not work for me as well as some. I mean, you give me those still shots of him, and he's just compelling and fascinating, and he is iconic. But I think that's probably why, in part, he was typecast. But I think also, I don't think his range was probably the same as like Jimmy Cagney and some of the other actors who were working in the 30s in Hollywood. But anyway, so my favorite character pick is, in fact, Renfield.
Hey, nice.
I kind of figured. I knew one of us would have him.
Well, I mean, Dwight Fry is super over the top when he becomes crazy Renfield, but it is disturbing. I mean, like that laugh he gives. I mean, and that weird maniacal face, and especially when you see him at the beginning in his little, solicitor togs with his briefcase, and he's like, "Oh yes, get my luggage," and then all of a sudden he is just, no pun intended, batshit crazy, and it is scary and unnerving and it's just great. I pity the character too. Most of the characters, Mina and Jonathan, all them, I have no feelings about it at all. They're stick figures to get us into the story. But I think that after Dracula and Van Helsing, he's about the only person you can actually care about or have feelings for, because he just put through hell, and it just
yeah,
it's just rough.
He could almost be like an archetype for Tolkien's Gollum, like this like innocent,
similar,
like
yeah,
everyday guy, like twisted into madness and turned into this medieval
talking about
rat.
He's got that whole master thing,
Yeah.
like Gollum does. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I'm about to look back on my timetable. I think that Tolkien was already working on Lord of the Rings when this film came out, and who knows if it played England. But you might be onto something. This is a doctoral thesis waiting to happen. Is
absolutely
Gollum a vampire or inspired by Lugosi?
The Dracula scholars and the Lord of the Rings scholars are gonna meet in the middle.
John, let's start with you for favorite scene. What is your favorite scene in this movie?
My favorite scene is when Dracula confronts the girl selling flowers outside of the opera house.
Oh, nice.
This is where you see just how truly evil he is, because this is an innocent young girl selling flowers. She offers him a flower for his buttonhole. He looks at her, immediately puts her in the thrall, and she's gone. And he's out there walking amongst the crowds. No one knows who he is, and that just kind of sets this neat little undertone that you get in a lot of movies, that you never really know what's going on with that person next to you. Are they a serial killer? Or did they design a supercomputer, or are they a vampire? And it just it just kind of plays into that whole what's really going on with that person type thing, and that I love in so many suspenseful movies.
I'm a big Jack the Ripper fan, and that scene reminds me of that whole kind of Ripper vibe, where it's like, I'm the elegant man about town in the middle of the world's biggest city, and I just happened to slaughter someone and no one even noticed. It just, it's so creepy, and
it really is. It really sets up. It's hammered home later with Edward Van Sloan's. Like, one of his best lines in this movie is when he talks about the power of the vampire is that people will not believe in him.
Exactly.
Is that
exactly?
I can stalk through the streets as I may, and no one will ever suspect it.
Yeah. Liam, your favorite scene?
I have to go with not the first, but the second confrontation between Dracula and Van Helsing. I love from the minute Dracula glides through the open window after everyone else runs upstairs and just yells Van Helsing, to the lines about I'll make sure she dies by night, and then Van Helsing shoots back, and then I will tear your abbey down stone by stone and excavate it a mile around until I find you and put a stake in your heart. They're so ruthless, though. Lines they shoot back and forth to each other. It's so powerful. And then you get that great moment where Dracula tries to use his power, and he has to put so much more oomph into it than he ever has with anybody else in the film, and Van Helsing still manages to resist. And I got the idea that this is the first time Dracula's had this problem.
Yeah.
It's so good. I can watch that scene over and over. It's just such a great character study.
How fantastic. I was hard to pick a favorite scene, but I think I already kind of touched on it. I love some of the establishing scenes in the beginning, both when the brides are all kind of heading toward the window, but even that earlier scene where we first kind of get into the crypt back at the castle. I think it's back at the castle, and we see the mist kind of rolling out, and then the coffins slowly open, and then one by one they come out. It is just such a great scene. It's just so moody and so creepy, and I just love it a lot. And as I mentioned earlier, the Philip Glass score, he wrote a score for the film in 1998. Dracula, like most movies of that time, did not actually have any kind of film score at all.
No.
They used music from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake and just kind of dropped it in here and there. It wasn't really until King Kong, about a couple years later, that RKO got Max Steiner to write what we think of now as a film score with lots of music. Before, they would just use whatever. But so Philip Glass in 1998 wrote an actual score for this film, and it is great. It is just moody and ominous and really, so his underscoring for those kind of menacing scenes was great. So I got to plug that. I am partial to Glass, so that helped too. I got to say too, I was reading ahead because I was like, well, Frankenstein, which we will be covering soon. Frankenstein was the same year, and I remember Frankenstein having some original music. Well, I went back and did some homework.
Yes.
Well, no, it does not. Frankenstein has Frankenstein's theme, which was over the opening titles. That is this great piece of music that they literally play the exact same piece of music like twice more during the movie, and it did not have a score written for it until a number of like in the 90s as well. I think it was in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s, and I have not heard that particular score, so I want to watch.
Oh, I might be
Frankenstein
mixing my versions up. I might have found that version on YouTube or something one time, and then they took it down.
Because the main Frankenstein has an original piece of music, unlike Dracula, but it's basically just that really pretty, moody violin Frankenstein theme we hear at the beginning and a couple more times. But it didn't have like what we think of as like a soundtrack like they used to. All right, this is going to be the most contentious and exciting part of the evening, I'm sure. We're going to ask you both your favorite remake or alternate take on a Dracula or a vampire story. I will start again with Liam this time. Liam, what is your favorite? Not this Dracula.
Well, I will cheat and do two. My favorite iteration of Dracula, my other favorite iteration of Dracula is Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. I actually have a little Nosferatu collectible action figure right here. But yeah, I adore it. Is one of the most thrilling examples of horror and German expressionism you will ever see. I've talked about it on this podcast before, so I won't go into too much, but it is an excellent, if not entirely legal telling of the Dracula story. As far as my favorite vampire film, though, it's actually very recent. I gotta give it up for Sinners.
Excellent choice.
Ever since that movie dropped, my mom and I have been obsessed with it. I am a big fan of what is known as the Southern Gothic that was made popular.
No spoilers yet. I have not seen it.
So don't worry. I won't spoil
It is
anything for you. But I will say it is a blend of a lot of different vampire films, vampire legends, and it has a phenomenal plot of its own, as well as some great African-American representation and some great music. So I got to give it up for Sinners.
It's on my list. I will catch that for sure. How about you, John? What's your favorite, not Dracula?
Okay, I'm going to cheat as well with two. I'm going to butt up against Liam's choice of Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, but I'm going to go with the 2024 version of Robert Eggers' Nosferatu.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
It is a beautifully shot movie. If you want to see a movie that is as close to the original novel of Dracula without being the original story, then this is the one for you. I mean, it's beautifully shot. It's incredibly acted. I didn't have a whole lot of expectations for it when I saw it, and it just blew me away. I will also, I have to give a very high praise to Sinners, but that is not my other choice. My other choice, and this is based solely on nostalgic reasons. Dayton will hate this choice, and I will preface that right now. But I gotta go with the Lost Boys.
Oh, I love the Lost Boys.
Much like Dracula, the Lost Boys set the tone for what would become the modern age of vampires. So those are my picks: Nosferatu from 2024 and the Lost Boys.
Yeah, I think the Lost Boys is a fantastic film. I've talked about that before as well.
I'm glad you guys paved the way with two choices, because I also had two choices, didn't want to have to pick. So I'm going to join the club and have two cheats. One is not my first choice, but since we're talking about Nosferatu, I also have a Nosferatu film that is not the Symphony of Horror from 22.
Oh, I know where you're going.
2024 remake, but Shadow of a Vampire.
I love that movie.
Yeah. Isn't it great? Willem Dafoe, John Malkovich, Cary Elwes, Eddie Izzard. I mean, the cast is already amazing.
Yes.
And I have to preface it by saying you do need to see the Murnau Nosferatu from 1922 to really appreciate this movie. I think you could manage it without, but it is such an homage, but it's also got its own quirky, weird-ass story, and the performances are amazing. Willem Dafoe, who sometimes gets on my nerves, is perfect in this movie. Yeah, and John Malkovich, who likewise sometimes gets on my nerves, he is great. The casting is great. The throwbacks and references and homages to the original Murnau film are perfect. So that is in the Nosferatu trilogy now. You guys have out there listening often have to catch up on those three films. Maybe we need to do a Nosferatu episode. Just saying.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I'm for it.
My actual first pick, and I was saving this up for the end. I am known for, of course, my Broadway references. I got to mention the play every time. In this episode, the original stage play by John Balderston and Hamilton Dean was revived in the 1970s, late 1970s, and it is best known and is still known for the sets and costumes were by Edward Gorey, who, if you are not a fan, you need to become one. He's best known now for the opening credits to Mystery, the television series with the black and white crosshatch drawings and all that. He wasn't super well known. He'd been working since the 1950s, but they gave him a big budget, and he did the sets and costumes for this Dracula in his style. It looks like a drawing come to life. Everything was drawn. So even things like chairs, they had like painted them white, and they like drew like black on the surfaces of the chairs. So that everything looks like it was like a drawing come to life. And there were, I think, 5 different sets, one for each scene, and each set also had one red thing. So in one scene, there was a red flower in a vase, and in another scene, someone is wearing a little bit of red. And I did not see it in New York. I saw it when it came to Los Angeles, which makes me happy because Raul Julia, may he rest in peace, as our beloved Gomez Adams, was Dracula in New York. But on the tour, when I saw Los Angeles, I got to see Jeremy Brett.
You did not.
I did. And he got best known now for, of course, the PBS Sherlock Holmes roles. But he was Dracula. I was a big Edward Gorey fan before this. This is what really made Gorey famous. A year later, he did the Mystery opening credits, and now is kind of more of a household name than he used to be. But the stage play was hokey and corny, but they did not wink at it at all. They just were also earnest. But basically, you were just watching an Edward Gorey book come to life, and it was delightful. So that was my very favorite ever version of Dracula that was not this one. But kind of circles back because it was from the original play that the movie got based on. The play was so successful that Gorey actually, they put out a I wouldn't say a paper doll book, but this big book. It was like 18 by 24 of his sets, and you could cut out little coffins and little things like that, and set them up. And they had little cutouts of the characters you could position and stuff. And then a year or two after that, he did illustrate an edition of the novel. So there's an Edward Gorey illustrated edition of the novel Dracula as well. But it was spectacular, and Jeremy Brett was dashing, and you can imagine. Alrighty, well, so we have come to the almost come to dawn now. We need to close this up before something horrible happens. So let's get a final word and a rating from you guys on 1 to 5 bats. How do you rate this film? This time around, I'll start with you, John. So any final thoughts and a 1 to 5 bats rating for Dracula?
Final thoughts is, again, this is what established the modern horror world. We would not have a lot of the movies. We would not have Sinners. I would not have the 2024 Robert Eggers Nosferatu without the 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula. So on a scale of 1 to 5 bats, I have to give this version a solid 3.5 bats.
Fair. What kept you from going a little higher?
Because there are some issues with editing, because there are some issues with performance, as we mentioned, and just the lack of technology that was available to them does cause the movie to suffer just a little bit in my eyes, because I am used to the more modern visual aspects of movies.
So the reason I asked that, John, was because I also was giving it 3.5 bats, and I feel so sorry for the half bat. I don't know if it's like one wing or what, but
right.
But and for that same reason, much as I love old movies, this one's just on that slightly wrong side of just kind of dated and primitive. I think the way other people think about like all black and white movies, or maybe movies from like the 40s, I feel like this. I can just see that it's a nascent art form. They haven't got it all together yet. So to Liam's point, a few years later, this would have probably inched up, but it was a 3.5 bat from me as well. How about you, Liam? What was any final thoughts and a rating for this movie?
I will acknowledge there are flaws in this movie, but I have such fond memories of it. Every time I watch it, it gives me this big warm feeling, like an autumn sweater that I wear in October. I will say, like, for all of the holes you can see in a burgeoning art form, I will argue that this film deserves a little bit more credit, because for all of that, you can see. I love seeing the beginnings of things, so it's really fun to watch this and see, like, for all of the like stiltedness that can be there sometimes, you really see this like glowing ember that will soon emerge into the wildfire that is the glorious horror film genre. And so for that reason, I will give it 4 bats.
Nice.
Excellent. And I just want to give a shout out. I hope our listeners appreciate that this is probably the only podcast on in America where you get to hear the words nascent and burgeoning back to back in 2 comments. So just saying, we may be goofy, but we are brainy as well. So just
2 of us are. Then there's me.
Hey, you're plenty smart, John. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, I will
exactly.
I will jump back into my rating for just a second, because I gave it just a few more thoughts while you guys were talking.
Sure.
The other reason for the 3.5 is as much as I love this movie, and I do really love it, I discovered this movie first, and that led me to the book. And I just cannot separate my love from the book from this version of the movie. And that's where the deductions truly come from. The changes that they made just don't work for me as well as they do for others. And that is what it is. But that's what makes this so interesting. We shouldn't always agree on everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I will say this is definitely one of those things where you need Gonzo from the end of The Muppet Christmas Carol. If you like this, you should read the book.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, that's my answer to everything, is read the book. But that's just my old self coming out. So anyway, I want to thank you both for being here. Liam, thank you so much for jumping in, especially at the last minute.
I am very happy to have joined you on this gothic feature.
If I hadn't actually spoken to Amber earlier, I would have thought you had like done her in or something, just because I knew you really wanted to talk about Dracula. So,
well, you don't know that I didn't.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, that's going to bear some thinking about. All righty. And then John, also, thank you so much. It was nice. I've never been on an episode with you. This was fantastic. Thank you.
We were on one a very, very long time ago. It was a top 7 of one of the years. Yes, because I stole your thunder with only murder. I stole your thunder with only murder in the building. as being one of the top
that
7.
was you.
Yes, that was me.
So I didn't forget you. I blocked you. Okay.
Yes, and that's totally fine and totally acceptable. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. I've been looking forward to doing something like this for a long time.
Nice. And I need to ask, you are always so busy doing things. Do you have anything fun coming up in October or after?
Yes. Well, actually, October looks a little. Yes, I'm sorry. I will be at Cincinnati Comic-Con at the end of the month, with all the Supermen minus Henry Cavill as of right now. But yes, so I will be there and probably popping up 1 or 2 more other places before the end of the year.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much. That is exciting. If they get Henry, I'm in. Just saying,
My wife said the same thing.
And R.I.P. Christopher Reeve. But anyway, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for indulging us in another episode of Docking Bay 77 podcast. We will be talking about more Universal horror movies in the coming weeks. And then, as I mentioned earlier, October is going to be zombie month. So we're going to go from, I guess, the semi-undead to the really undead or something. Anyway, thank you, listeners, for joining us. And of course, you can follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Discord at Docking Bay 77, all those places. We also have a terrific Patreon that we would love to have you join in, because there's bonus features and special unedited episodes and all kinds of cool stuff showing up there. I also want to mention that, even though it's not in the notes, but we now have some fun YouTube videos that have been popping up that are just little short form videos where we talk about our top favorite 7, anything, one host, 7-10 minutes, you're in and out. They're really fun. Check those out on YouTube, Docking Bay 77. Upcoming episodes, as I said, we're going to be channeling through the Universal horrors with The Invisible Man, The Mummy, and Frankenstein coming up in the next few weeks, and then lots of zombies after that. And of course, as always, don't forget, physical media is always better.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. A word before you go. We hope the memories of Dracula and Renfield won't give you bad dreams. So just a word of reassurance. When you get home tonight and the lights have been turned out, and you are afraid to look behind the curtains, and you dread to see a face appear at the window, why, just pull yourself together and remember that after all, there are such things as vampires.
The Docking Bay 77 podcast is produced and edited by Dayton Johnson, recorded with Rode Pod mics, the Zoom PodTrack P4, and edited on Audacity. Opening music provided by Eric Jason Brock. You can find him on YouTube and Bandcamp. Thank you for listening.